Pulpit, episode 4, take 1, Mark.
So, Pastor Thompson, tell me your life story.
Well, I was born in Portland, Oregon at OHSU Hospital up on the hill. And
So you are a Portland guy.
I am. I'm from Portland, born and raised, yeah. So as a kid, we moved to Eastern Oregon, though, for a little while. Well, probably until I was in 5th grade. And then my mom and stepdad got divorced, and it was kind of ugly. So I ended up moving to Portland and lived there for a little while, and then grew up there on the mean streets. So anyway, yeah, I went to high school in the inner city and got into a little bit of trouble here and there. So
Were you in public school all the way
yeah,
up?
Yeah, I was in a public school the whole time. Didn't have a Christian background growing up at all, so I think I went to an Assemblies of God church one time, and I remember hearing a story about Jonah in the Sunday school class, and then like it was candy upstairs. So that was about it. And then I went home, and my stepdad said, "You're never going back," and I was like sad, but I'm glad now because
Yeah, you would have got the wrong doctrine.
exactly. So I didn't want to roll around on the floor or anything like that and bark like a dog. So so anyway, and my dad actually he got wrapped up into this false religion, and it was like a charismatic church where they like spoke in tongues and did weird stuff. So anytime I went to see my dad, because my dad and mom got divorced when I was like 2, so anytime I went to go visit him or go to one of his churches, it was like it started out normal and they would just sing songs, and all of a sudden they're just like and acting all.
And that kind of just turned you away.
Yeah. In the Bible when it says that aren't they gonna think you're mad? Yeah, they are. So it was kind of it was really. The pastor would get mad when they'd see me in the back laughing. So, because I thought it was crazy.
Well, maybe it was just a laughing revival for all he knew, right?
Yeah, unholy
maybe you were laughing in the spirit.
Unholy laughter. Anyway, so as a teen, I got in some trouble. I mean, I'll admit that, and repent of my sins over that. But I mean, I wasn't even saved. So I didn't get saved till I was 25 years old, and me and my wife met 5 years before I got saved.
So you met your wife when you were about 20 years old?
Yeah.
So how did you meet her? Were you in college or were you working? Or?
No, actually, a friend of mine from high school was dating her sister, and so they introduced us, and then the rest is history. So, and they ended up getting married, then we ended up getting married, and so yeah, that's kind of how I met her. But in the teen years, I did get in trouble, but played sports like football and basketball, stuff like that. So I grew, between my freshman and sophomore year, I grew from 5'10" to 6'4" in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
So I was like tall and lanky, and I could dunk a basketball back then.
Without even leaving the ground?
No, I had to leave. It took me a while. White man can't jump, so I had to really work at it.
So what did you do when you got out of high school? I mean, did you go straight into the workforce? Did you go to college?
Yeah, I just worked construction jobs. I worked for my dad during like when I was 18 to about 23 or 24, doing roofing and stuff like that. So I roofed houses, like probably the tallest roofer you've ever seen. So it wasn't really exactly a ergonomic profession for me.
Because you're kind of bending over.
Yeah, you're bending over all day.
Because even though it's a roof, you're standing on the roof, so you're working like on the floor from your perspective.
Yeah. So it's kind of a dumb profession for me to be in, honestly. Yeah. So, well, I did like siding and concrete and things like that. So just kind of did construction trades.
Maybe installing rain gutters would have been good. Like, don't even need a ladder, just kind of.
Well, you do that with roofing when you tear the roof off. Then the gutters come off sometimes, and you have to put the gutters back on. So yeah, I did work with gutters a lot.
So you worked in construction for a while. What'd you do after that?
I worked in retail. So after I got married, I worked in retail. Actually,
where?
I worked at Walmart.
Okay.
So,
wait, were you embarrassed to say that? Is that why you're like, I worked in retail sector, Walmart. I worked at Walmart, okay?
Give me a break. No. Well, I worked in the logistics side, so.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was a little better.
It was the logistics side,
So I actually worked at a warehouse. I moved over to Eastern Oregon from Portland where I lived
Okay.
for about 7 years, and worked the guard shack type. I did like loss prevention, but it was like the warehouse style loss prevention.
Right.
So like we checked in all the truck drivers, which was like thousands of trucks per year. So it was pretty cool. I liked doing that. I coached all my kids in sports, and they grew up and they played football and basketball and baseball and wrestling and all that stuff. So
You were real involved in that.
yeah, I was a head football coach, and just like the little, the kid leagues and like through like their middle school years and stuff like that. So
What'd you do after retail? After your stint in retail?
After my stint in retail, it was during all that time when the kind of the depression of the 2007
Right.
through. So I moved back because my wife's mom got sick with cancer, and so we moved back so she could take care of her. And so she passed away, and then so I started working for like a shoe warehouse. It's called. Have you ever heard of Doc Martens before? Doc Marten boots.
Doc Martens, Yeah, oh yeah. I saw a little documentary one time about how they're made.
Yeah. So I worked at a warehouse there. I was like a safety training type person. So, and then I started working at my current location, which is a secret.
Oh, right. That's why you're being so evasive.
Yeah.
When are we going to get to your current job?
Yeah.
So
The
your
wrong
current
hands.
job is being the pastor
That's
of
right.
Sure Foundation Baptist Church.
That's
right?
right.
That's the job that matters. So do you have any funny stories about being tall? Just any funny things that happened as a result of being tall?
Well, I'm not like a mystic or anything, but like, but I think when you're tall, you start to develop a sixth sense of when things are above your head. Because like, as you saw when I walked in upstairs, it's like the first thing I did is go like this. Because I have hit my head quite a few times, so maybe that's what's wrong with me, I don't know. But no, one time I was dark in my friend's house. It was completely pitch black. And I didn't know, and I hung out at this guy's house all the time. Had no way of knowing that this was in the doorway, but he had one of those pull-up bars in his door. And it was so dark in there I couldn't see, and I was just walking into his room, and I just stopped. And like, I just felt the doorway, and I felt that bar. And if I would have,
sonar.
it would have like cut my head off or something. Yeah, it would have hurt pretty
So
bad.
you've developed, do you like click your tongue and then send the sound waves and get like a sonar where
I don't know, but
you don't bump
I avoid hitting my head a lot, and like, I don't know. I guess that's a funny, not
So
funny.
has there ever been something where they're like, sorry, you can't do this, you're too tall, or you can't ride on this ride, you're too tall, or you
There's
can't-
definitely things I can't do.
Like what?
Ride in economy airplane seats.
Really?
Oh man, yeah, it's like.
Oh yeah,
That's tough.
Recently I was stuck next to a guy like you. And the
Like,
guy
"Get
was
outta
the guy was like, about your height. He was like 6'8" or whatever. And I just had his elbow just right here the whole time, just elbow in the chops. I was just like, but I kind of was like, Father, forgive him. He knows not what he does. And I kind of felt bad for the guy because he was so tall that he had to put his body somewhere.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
So do you typically pay for a little upgrade or?
I do. I have to. When I flew back from New York, it was like the worst flight I've ever been on. Like I was in I think it might have been a plane.
I think the guy next to you had the worst flight. Honestly.
And I feel bad. It's like, when I used to go to the movies, but I don't go to the movies anymore.
Yeah.
But when I used to go to the movies, I always felt like I had to hunch down to my seat like this because I felt
you're
like I was
blocking
like,
it. It's like-
I was like, these people paid $10 to see this movie.
You're blocking everybody's view behind you.
Yeah.
Hey, you
so
make a
like,
better door than a window, buddy.
Exactly. Yeah, I get a lot of tall jokes too. I mean,
So tell us some tall jokes.
people always ask me like, how's the weather up there? Stuff like that.
Or like the oxygen's too thin up there. And
But my cousin's 7'1", and he kind of gave me a couple comebacks for those. When people say, "How's the weather up there?" I just spit on them and tell them it's raining. I don't really do that. That's funny though. Or if they say, "Hey, I bet you play basketball," and I'm like, "Yeah, I bet you play miniature golf too, huh?"
that's funny.
Or they say, "Do you play basketball?" I say, "Do you play miniature golf?"
That's funny. That's good.
Or I say, "Do you ride horses?" Or the little jockey guys. So
And you're 6'8".
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So you talk about getting into trouble. I mean, what kind of trouble you get into? Did you get into fights or anything? Or
Back in the country, when we'd get in fights, like the teachers would actually put boxing gloves on us sometimes. So like when I was in elementary school and things like that.
did people kind of want to challenge you because you're the biggest kid? Like it's like the gunslinger who's the quickest on the draw. Everybody wants a piece of him.
I think as I got older, people started to do that, and so like moving from a city to moving out into the country, and I grew up as a younger child in the country. So like the fights there were just like, yeah, whatever, pushing each other, calling each other names or whatever. But so the teachers would let us put boxing gloves on and duke it out, and like the first person to get knocked down, okay, it's over, whatever. So when I first moved to Portland in the 5th grade, I was really good at dodgeball, and so I was like tagging people.
I don't know. You're a pretty big target, though.
Yeah, back then I wasn't as big though. I was always the tallest kid in the class, but I wasn't like crazy tall like I am now. But I was playing dodgeball, and some of the kids from the like middle school would come, and so I was in elementary, and these middle school kids would come, and I remember this guy I was playing, and I was like, come on, and he threw the ball, and I caught it and got him out. I called him a faggot.
I can't believe that. That is so offensive to me. I can't believe you would use that word. I mean, this is for a family audience, buddy.
It was offensive to him because he came over and hit me in the mouth. So I was like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't go around calling people faggots all the time. Maybe I better get to know them a little better.
And then now you've kind of come full circle where you're calling people faggots again.
Yeah. I mean, it just never got out of me. Yeah. Well, we called each other that kind of stuff. Kids would razz.
It was a different time. I don't think the teachers are handing out boxing gloves now.
No, they're not.
To help kids.
Well, they got spanked. I got spanked at school too. Like I'm that old. Like where I still got spanked at school.
It was a different time then. How old are you?
43.
Oh, okay.
So the teachers would like drill holes through their paddles to see if they could get enough wind to, you went to a Christian school, so did they still spank at that time?
They did. I don't know if I ever got spanked though. I mean, they did. They definitely spanked kids, but I don't think I ever got spanked. Maybe one time, but I don't even think I did. I mean, I got spanked by my parents a lot. But I don't think I ever got spanked by the principal. If I did, I don't remember.
Yeah,
but they definitely were doing it though. But they were even doing it in public school, because you were in public school. And getting spanked.
Yeah, and I was in the country.
It was a different time.
I didn't even spit on a girl. I spit by a girl.
Did you tell her it was raining?
No. But I just spit by her, and the principal spanked me for that, or the vice principal. It was always the vice principal. They were like the bulldogs,
Right. It's kind of good cop, bad cop. The vice principal was the one you actually feared.
Yeah.
Well, how did you end up getting saved?
Me and my wife were just boyfriend and girlfriend at the time, and I wasn't even. We'd already had kids together before I got saved and stuff like that. So. So it's kind of weird. So I was at a Chinese food restaurant on my birthday in January before we split up, and I remember this guy. We were talking about how fake the news is and stuff. I mean, I was kind of a conspiracy theory guy even before, being a Christian. So I just was like, yeah, the news is fake, and they just seem so, ungenuine, and the news stories are stupid. And we started talking, and he just started talking to me about the Lord, and I was just like, I don't want to hear that. I wasn't interested. And so it kind of gives sometimes when you're trying to give someone the gospel and they say they're not interested, but they're still friendly, it's good to not go scorched earth on them and, act like that's the last time they're ever going to hear something. Right. Because he gave me his number, and he worked for a company called Covenant Drywall. And it was, he was a drywall guy, had a little dove on there. So then I was working for my uncle at the time, just doing remodeling and stuff like that. And he started talking to me about these Left Behind books that he had borrowed from his aunt, or I don't know, somebody let him borrow them. We were talking we knew nothing,
Right.
We had absolutely no knowledge. And I said, well, hey, I got this guy's number. Maybe he can answer some of our questions. And so I had lost his number. I looked everywhere for it, couldn't find it. And so kind of time just went by. And then I had 3 deaths in my family during that time. So, and one of them was my best friend, who was dating my sister at the time, and my brother and him were at a party or something, and some things went wrong, and they just started fighting. And so in the middle of the street, like they were fighting in the middle of the street or something, and a car came by, hit my friend, killed him.
Wow.
And he died in my cousin's arms. And it was awful. But I remember going to the funeral, and it was a huge funeral. Like all of our friends were there, and just a whole bunch of people. And he was a Grand Ronde Indian tribal member. So they had like a Christian mixed with
Traditional.
like peyote religion at the same time. And they were like saying, he's fishing with Grandpa Moon, and he's with grandmother son, or I don't know, whatever they say. But it was mixed with Christianity. It like had some, they were talking about Jesus, and then they were talking about this, and they were putting curses on us.
Well, the peyote religion mixes in Jesus.
Oh, it does? Okay.
Oh, yeah. That peyote religion, it only goes back like 100 years.
Right, yeah.
It was started literally in the late 1800s.
Yeah.
They think it's their traditional religion that goes back super long. But what it is it's a mix of traditional stuff with Christianity. So if you read up on it, it's heavily Christian influence. So probably wasn't a joint ceremony. It was probably just the peyote people doing it.
Yeah, it was.
And they were just mixing in Jesus because that's what they do. Mix in a little bit of that.
That was really weird. And I just remember feeling confused about everything. And like I was like into horoscopes and things like that. I like had one of them big horoscope books that I would look at, and I was like really interested in that. And at the same time that happened, I was actually working for an all Jehovah's Witness roofing company.
Oh, wow.
So like, yeah, I'm like,
It's like, I'm getting the horoscopes, peyote religion, Jehovah's Witness. I went to a few tongue-talking churches. I mean, you really had quite an experience.
Yeah, and so like my wife, we were still friends and stuff, even though we weren't like, dating or anything anymore. And it was before, we weren't married. But she had given me these chick comic books that because her aunt and uncle were deacon, or he was a deacon and she was a deaconess or whatever at this Baptist church. And, I know that chick is complete garbage and all that. But the issue I read was called Sabotage. I'm not trying to promote Jack Chick or anything. I think he's wicked as hell, so don't get me wrong. But in that comic, it explains how the King James Bible is the Word of God.
Yeah. And
so I believed it. Just like it made total sense to me that, all the other versions were wrong. And, it just, I don't know. It's a weird thing to become King James only before you're even saved, but.
Well, I've heard a ton of people say the exact same thing.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people said that they watched Kent Hovind's thing and became King James only, and then they got saved years later.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have that same testimony. I mean, God can use a lot of different things to plant seeds.
Yeah.
I know people who watched Hollywood movies that quoted a King James verse, and it got stuck in their head. And so all of these things can plant seeds in people's minds for sure. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it was really, so like I was in a conflict of what's right, what's wrong, what is the real religion. I wasn't quite sure. But once I read that, I like the Jehovah's Witnesses were trying, the people, because they knew my friend died, and I took a little bit of time off, and they were trying to get me to go to their Bible studies and stuff. And so when I finally went, I was King James only, but I was not saved. So
but at least that protected you from the Jehovah's Witnesses.
It did. It totally did, because I was like, you guys are like a cult from Alexandria.
Right.
And I was just like,
that part.
I was giving them the business, and I wasn't even saved. So I remember praying. At that time because I was super confused, and I just remember praying to God and saying, God, if you're right, or just show me what's right. Show me what the true religion is. I want to know what the real truth is.
Seek and you shall find.
Yeah, and I remember praying that, like I remember where I was at when I prayed that prayer. Wasn't saved. No, I wasn't saved. And so, I went to the funerals, and I think that going to those funerals had an effect on me too, because, where'd they go? Where are they at?
Right.
And so it made me, all this combination just kind of got me to the place where I'm like ready to be saved, right? And so I just needed the right person. So 6 months, almost to the date of the time I was at that place with the guy with the Covenant drywall card, I go into a different Chinese food restaurant in downtown Milwaukee, Oregon. I don't know if you know where that is, but it's kind of in a suburb of Portland. And so I walk into the restaurant, and guess who's there? The same guy that I met at the other Chinese food restaurant. Cool. So I walked
you guys
in.
Both like your Chinese food.
Yeah, I guess so. So I walk in, I'm like, man, I've been looking for you everywhere. I said, I lost your number. I have all these questions. And, you know, at the time, I was driving around. I had like a big family King James Bible with the picture of Jesus on the front. In the back of my car, I took it everywhere I went. I was reading the Bible and trying to understand it, but I couldn't understand it. And so, yeah.
But that's so encouraging because, you know, here's a guy, he tries to give you the gospel, tries to get you saved. You're totally blowing him off. You have no interest. And then God just works in your life for 6 months, just circumstance after circumstance, to where you're broken down to the point where you're searching for the guy's number. You want to talk to him, and then you find him. Boy, am I glad to see you. But that's encouraging for us when we're out witnessing to people and they blow us off.
Right.
How many of those people does God continue to work and water that seed? And,
Exactly.
And especially if we pray for people. Maybe he even prayed for you.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. So I walk in, I see him, and I'm like, man, I've been looking for you everywhere. And he was like, I said, I've got all these questions, and this is a room full of people, and I don't care. Like, I'm just like, everybody else don't care. I just want to focus on this guy and him answering my questions. And he says, well, hold on a second. He said, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and that he died for your sins? And I just thought for a second. I was like, yeah, I do. I do believe that. So he goes, well, let's go outside. So we go outside, and he goes, you got a Bible? I said, yeah, I do. He said, you got a King James Bible? I said, yeah, I do. I grabbed that big old Bible, and he's like, wow, that's cool, you know? And
Well,
so
for you, you're probably just palming the thing.
yeah,
It's
it's
just
like
your
fit
size.
my fingers. But yeah, so he just went through the Romans road and showed me what it takes to be saved, and he asked me to call upon the name of the Lord. And I said, where at? And he's like, right here. And so we just, both of us got on our knees, and I trusted Christ. And
Wow,
never
that's a
looked
really
back
cool
from
story.
being that I was never doubted that I was ever saved ever since then.
So did you get in church right away? Did you get baptized right away, or did it take a little time?
It took time. It took about 6-7 months. So like I told you, me and my wife weren't together at that time, and so it happened to me really quick to understand that I needed to make things right with my wife and my with my soon-to-be wife, because I asked her to marry me. But you know, it took a few months. I was going over and visiting her and trying to get her saved, because at one point, like, we were so disagreeable that she was like, I wouldn't even take you back if you were a preacher. Yeah, she did.
Careful what you say, huh?
Yeah, she did take me back when I became a preacher. But I preached the gospel to her for like 3 months. And one night I just said, I said, you know what, if you guys all died in a car crash, you and the kids all died in a car crash, I said, they would go to heaven and you'd go to hell. And she was like, get out of my house. She kicked me out. But it worked in her heart, and she said later on that night she realized that what I was saying was the truth, and she went down and called upon the name of the Lord by herself.
And that's encouraging too. So some of these people that are yelling at us and slamming the door, they might think about it later on too, once they cool down.
Yeah. So then she told me about it, and then I asked her to. I didn't want to marry her because I knew that I wasn't supposed to marry her if she wasn't saved.
Right.
I knew a little bit. And the funny thing is, you brought up the Kent Hovind thing. Well, she also had given me a bunch of his VHS tapes. And so I was, just
What's a VHS tape? No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I know what a VHS tape is.
We'll put a link in the description.
Just Google it, folks.
Yeah. So anyway, so we ended up getting married. Well, we ended up going to a church. And because of Kent Hovind's videos, I became Baptist just because of listening to his preaching and his seminars and stuff. And like I said, well, I'll go to church with you, but it's got to be a Baptist church. So Chick Comics made me King James only, and Kent Hovind made me Baptist. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just the truth. But it's because of the King James only teaching and just dismantling the evolution stuff that I was like, wow, I can't believe this stupid stuff. And I wasn't really like a full believer in evolution, but there was things that were taught in school, and I was just like, man, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
It was just, it never really fully set with me.
So did you just kind of seek out a Baptist church, or which one did you go to?
Well, her aunt and uncle were the ones that were giving me, the supplies or whatever.
Oh, okay.
So we ended up going to that church, and then shortly after, my wife got baptized, and then I got baptized, and then we got married.
And was that like a fundamental Baptist church?
Yes, King James only, fundamental Baptist.
And that was in the Portland area, or Vancouver?
It was in Vancouver, yeah.
Vancouver, Washington.
Yep. So we went there for about a year and a half, and after that I moved away to a different church over in Hermiston, Oregon. So, yeah, I mean, and then, you know, ended up moving back, like I said before, when my wife's mom got sick and stuff like that. So then we moved back to the same church, and things weren't the same.
So you've been saved now for, what, 18 years then,
Yeah.
approximately?
Yeah. Yep. So, but when we went back to that church, it was like totally changed. And,
What had changed?
well, I remember the pastor's wife would mow the grass in a dress. Like they had like a big property, like.
Right.
And so I remember looking at her do that one time, and I was like, why would you wear, you know, a dress while you're mowing the lawn? But look, that was a good testimony.
Yeah, right.
You know?
She was being ladylike.
And all their kids wore dresses, except for the son, of course, he wore pants. But when we came back, they were all in pants. I was just like, what is going on here? It was just weird, you know, and I just noticed that there was something wrong. Like the preaching had changed, you know, and obviously
It wasn't the same.
It wasn't the same, no. So, well, and then we ended up leaving that church, you know, after we started listening to you. No, no, but we got in a big repentance fight, and you know, it wasn't a fight. Like I wasn't like mean to the pastor, but you know, he just.
Well, it's an important issue.
It is, yeah. I got in trouble for preaching that Judas repented of his sins and went to hell to the teens, and then the deacons told on me.
Well,
the other deacons.
that is what the Bible says in Matthew
Yeah.
chapter 27, verse 3.
Yeah, you know.
But how dare you bring that up? Now, originally, you never planned on being a pastor. So how did you end up becoming a pastor?
Yeah, and that's funny because like I started to think I was too old to become one, but I never, like I even went to my pastor one time and said, would you train me? You know, because I did want to be a pastor, but then I would just like, okay, well, you know, maybe it's just not going to be for me or whatever. And so I'd kind of set that aside and just was like, I'm ready. I'm okay with just being a church Joe. You know, I'm okay. I've always been just okay with being Joe church member. You know, it's not that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what happened was, you know, we were supposed to have that church start up there, and kind of everything kind of fell apart there for a little bit. And I just know that I had been gathering, like trying to just keep a group together. We were all soul winning and stuff like that. And we were doing our own little marathons over in Portland, and just doing different, like in Albany, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington, and just doing our own thing. And we're just kind of waiting for a church to start, you know. And so we had I'd say about 22 to 25 people that were wanting a church to start there. And so when we realized that the church wasn't going to start at the time it was supposed to, then everybody kind of got discouraged, and including me, and we were all just going to move away and go to different churches. We were going to pick whichever church we wanted to go to or whatever. And so then you made that video. What was it called again?
It was called like 2 different ways to start a
Yeah.
church or something. I was just explaining different ways that we could start churches.
Yeah. So
It was in the Home Depot parking lot.
yeah,
some reason.
yeah.
I think my wife was inside buying something, and so I was just had some time, and that thought was in my mind, and I made that video.
So before that you even made that video, Ryan Gallagher had said, we were out soul winning one time. He's like, well, what about you? You know, is there anything that makes you unqualified? And I was like, I don't think so. You know, like where I couldn't become a pastor.
Right.
And he's like, well, would you consider doing it? And I said, well, you know, I'll consider it. I'll think about it, pray about it. So then I was talking to Justin Sawyer, which is another friend of mine. He goes to my church now too. And, you know, he just has a different way of saying things. He was like, you just need to step up, bro. That's what you need to do. And so I was like, all right, I'm hearing you. So then I got 2 people, you know, saying that I need to pursue, you know, becoming a pastor. And then you made that video. And like, I just felt like God spoke to my heart. I mean, seriously. I was like, I never even thought of that, you know, starting like a satellite type church. And I called a couple people, and they're like, you just need to move, whatever. And then I called Pastor Jimenez, and I just explained to him everything. And I said, what do you think about this? And he was like, well, let me think about it. Let me pray about it. And so then it became, you know, this is during the Orlando stuff. And he's got all this stuff on his plate. And I didn't want to bother him, but I just called him. I just said, well, you know, I know you're busy and all this stuff's going on. I said, but what do you think about this? And I wasn't even really necessarily asking him to do it. It's just, you know, it just became that.
You were just trying to get advice, But
I was
then
just trying to get advice.
He stepped up to the plate and
Yeah.
basically helped you get there.
Well, he asked me to go to my current pastor, which he wasn't against us or anything, but he didn't want to send me out because we don't believe the same. So, like, I met with him because Pastor Jimenez asked me to go to him and see if he would send me out first. And so I did, and we met at Starbucks, and we were like, he was excited, I was excited, but then when I said, well, when are we going to do the ordination? He said, well, I'm not going to lay hands on you.
He's like, I'm really excited about you leaving,
Yeah, basically.
but I'm not going to send you out.
Yeah, basically. Well, he had asked me to start a satellite for his church
Right.
at one point, and I said no because we don't believe the same.
Because he liked you.
Yeah.
But it's just these certain issues that the old IFB has with us over the rapture and the Jews, which are really just secondary issues. But he liked you and he approved of you as a person. And like you said, he wanted you to actually be a preacher, and he wanted to sponsor you at one point. But it was just these issues where, he doesn't want to get in trouble with his preacher buddies, and he can't be connected to you or associated with you or touch you with a 10-foot pole because of that. Yeah, that makes sense.
So that happened, and so I called Pastor Jimenez back, and he said no. He goes, okay, well, fine, let's do it. And I was like, okay.
So what was it like working with Pastor Jimenez? Because you were basically under Pastor Jimenez's authority and under his tutelage, and he basically trained you, mentored you, and supervised you for the first, 2 years?
Yep.
So what was that like, working with him?
It was great. I mean, we never have had a crossword one time. He never yelled at me. There was a couple times I thought he might, but I was like, Pastor, you could yell at me. I don't care. You can yell at me. I need it. Maybe I need to be toughened up or something. Because, Pastor Jimenez is larger than life. I mean, he might be, smaller in stature, but he's like a pit bull spiritually. I mean, and so there's just times where I thought, well, he's going to be mad about this or whatever, and he just wasn't, and it was really easy.
So he was very patient and everything.
Yeah, it was super easy to work with.
Gave you everything you needed, gave you the tools to get the job done.
Yeah, and then eventually it's like, he just, it didn't take long for him to trust me, because I think the first time he came up and saw, how put together everything was, that he was...
It gave him confidence.
Yeah, it gave him confidence to kind of...
That he wasn't going to have to...
loosen the leash a little bit.
Yeah, he wasn't going to have to hold your hand, because you got in there and you got things done and took charge, and you were the boots on the ground, and then he could just supervise from afar, but he didn't have to sit there and micromanage or anything.
Right. And we got a great core group of church members, and we're running 100 now, so...
That's great. Wow.
It just happened overnight.
I mean,
what happened?
I just wish people would understand. I mean, starting an independent fundamental Baptist church in the year 2017, 2018, 2019, and to just be running 100 a couple years later, that's just not happening in other places. And especially because if you ask the people in our churches, how many of you were raised fundamental Baptist, it's like less than 10%. It's like sometimes less than 5%. So God is really doing a great work. I mean, being able to start a church from scratch and be running over 100 is a huge blessing.
It is.
And especially because you're not bringing them in with a rock band. It's not the fun center. You're bringing them in the right way with biblical preaching, sound doctrine. They're going out into the highways and hedges. They're doing soul winning. Well, I mean, what percentage of your church would you say does soul winning?
100.
100%. I believe it. I've been up there.
I'm serious. Unless it's like a first-time visitor and they've never been there before, but 100%.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, yeah, it blows me away, because I look and I think, who hasn't been soul winning? It's like just everybody.
Yeah, except a visitor. Right.
Yeah, or somebody we kick out later. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's been great, and just watching the people in the church grow, because I've grown, spiritually and as a preacher, hopefully. But, the people, I was just watching Josh last night, my son Josh. He does this, he's like our main song leader right now, and he's only 16 years old. But he didn't know how to song lead at all. And Pastor Jimenez, I remember Pastor Jimenez teaching him how to do song lead. He knew a little bit, but he just owned it. And Nia, she learned how to play piano from your piano lessons.
It's so funny when people learn how to play from my piano books, and then they can play way better than I can. And I'm like, wow, you are good at piano. And then they're like, yeah, I learned from your. I'm like, whoa, how could I have taught you when you're twice as good as I am? But your church probably has more musical talent than any church that I've ever seen in this movement. I mean, it seems like whenever I'm at your church, they're just rotating piano players, and you have so many people playing violins and pianos and flutes and everything. You have a lot of musical talent.
Yeah,
over there.
we do. We really do. And it's,
great
I
singing.
want it to, like, we need to expand now because we're like outgrowing the building. And I just signed a 3-year lease. I'm like, what am I going to do? So we might have to start knocking some walls down and stuff.
Right.
And we already got some extra space acquired starting like in February. So
That's awesome.
But watching Josh, going back to Josh, I mean, watching Josh last night, we were in church and he said, let's do favorites. He didn't know anything.
To have that confidence as a 16-year-old.
He
Hey,
knows-
let's take a request.
He knows every song in the hymn book by heart and what number the song is.
Wow, that's
He's
great.
a freak.
That's cool.
But, but it's great. Watch, and Nia, having only been able to play like a few songs, and now she could play everything. It's
Wow,
that's just like a couple examples, but even the soul winning, like we had people that had never won a soul to Christ, and then we make a big deal out of it when someone wins their first soul at our church. We give them a big hand and say congratulations, and
So now your kids are starting to get married. What's that like?
Yeah, I had to bring that up, didn't No. So in 6 months, we've had 3 of them,
Wow.
married and moved away.
So Josh is the only
Not
one.
moved away, but moved out.
But Josh is the only one that's left.
Yeah.
Wow. So what's that like?
Well, it's been a little bit difficult. Like after Nia got married, she just got married a few weeks ago, and it hit me, man. It hit me hard, like right in the heart. I don't know. I'm not gonna cry, but I did the next day after she got married. I just, it's just weird. They're with you for, 20 years or whatever, and then they moved out.
So did you feel a little bit of a sense of relief just to see them marry godly people, just making good choices, not going off the deep end, but doing things right, marrying a believer? I mean, didn't that feel good, though?
Felt great.
Kind of like crossing the finish line?
Yeah. Now we just worry about Josh, and that's it. No, but so that's the amazing. I've purposed in my heart and in my life as a Christian that I don't want my kids to go off into the world, and I don't want them to quit church when they turn 18, like I've seen all these other kids in these stupid Sunday school programs and stuff. It's a real problem in Baptist churches. Like as soon as they're 18, they're getting tattoos and drinking beers, and they're off in the world or joining the military.
I've seen it my whole life. Yeah.
And I wanted my kids to be different, and I wanted to break the cycle of dysfunction in my family because I grew up in a dysfunctional family. Divorce.
And I think getting married young is good for that because then they don't just wander the wilderness for 20 years or 10 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? They basically, young, they get married, they're in church, they're starting a family. I mean.
Yeah, and Remy, he's already, I think he wants to be a pastor someday, and he's already turned into a really good preacher. And, we got a lot of guys that can preach at our church too. Like I've given them a lot of opportunities. So, and they're traveling to Boise. They're traveling up to Canada. We started a church up in Canada.
So your church has already planted another church. Yeah. So how's that church plant going up there?
It's going good.
How many people are showing up in Vancouver, Canada, right?
They had like 14 in their last service, which there was kind of some shenanigans that went on with, Bill. So he ordained some guy that wasn't qualified.
Right.
Basically, there was a few of the people that were supposed to start, they stayed with, that new pastor or whatever. So, but it's going great. I mean, they're winning.
So it's a small group, but they're doing soul winning, and they're in Canada.
Yeah, they're doing great. I mean, they picked. We already got a building for them. They were meeting in a house, and so we got a building. Once we got the building, now more people are coming.
Right.
They're getting visitors, and they're in a really receptive area for soul winning. When we went up there, when you got banned, that area was not receptive. It was like the least receptive place on the planet that I've ever been to. It was so bad because it's like the richest place in all of Canada. That area,
Vancouver, British Columbia,
Richmond.
Richmond
the place,
itself. Okay.
The place where we went was like.
I guess I should have done a little more research.
No, it's not your fault. You didn't know, but it was just like the people that we got saved there. was a miracle.
But there were still some salvations.
Oh
though.
yeah, there was. Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah,
don't
there
remember
was.
it being much of a bust. I mean,
No, people got
Yeah.
saved for sure.
But
it
when
was
it wasn't as receptive as other parts of Canada that we've done. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I didn't know, So but I think we got skunked at halftime, and then in the very rest of I think maybe we got one, but at the end of the day, I think we ended up with like 14 saved or something like that. But it's been going good up in Canada. I'm really excited for those guys.
So are
They're
you
excited.
training some guys in your church how to preach? Do you have like a preaching class or any kind of?
I'm starting one next month.
Oh, okay, cool.
So we're going to start one, and they've gotten to cut their teeth just doing sermons and men's preaching nights and things like that. Filling in, yeah, I'll help them preach. Guys preach on Sunday nights, and but we got a lot of guys that can preach at our church, and I'm thankful for that. And so we've been sending them here and there, and I want to start churches. I mean, I'm excited.
Amen.
So I don't want to do it too fast. Yeah, I know.
Seattle's huge. It's way bigger than Portland.
It is, and there's a lot of people that
Massive.
still drive from that area to our church.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Seattle's
people,
a big one.
It's big, and it's the matter of just finding a good spot because, it's like, you know how Portland is. So
Right.
that's why we're in Vancouver. You always make fun of me about that.
Now I find out you're actually from Portland, and after all the trash that you've talked about Portland.
A prophet is not without honor except for his own country.
I don't know. Did you see Paul Joseph Watson's video about Portland?
I did. I did.
It was the follow-up to his
Yeah, the
San Francisco video.
Yeah.
Wow, that was rough.
Yeah. It's
Then
pretty
after I
bad.
saad that, I could understand why you're like, hey, buddy, we're in Vancouver, Washington.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, it's weird. It's like a bubble of conservativeness in the West Coast.
People have to kind of go outside the camp to Vancouver, to the tabernacle of the congregation, right?
Yeah. That's where all the workers live. That's
Oh,
where the
then
workers
they come
live.
into Portland
The
to
rest
work?
of them are on the streets and protesting and stupid
You know, the one
things.
thing I noticed about Portland, driving down the streets of Portland, was it seemed like on every corner there was a pot dispensary and a dog grooming. It just seemed like it was marijuana, pet
Dogs.
grooming, marijuana, dogs, marijuana,
People
dogs.
worship their dogs there.
So
It's
what's it like pastoring in such a super liberal place? And I know you're in this little
Yeah.
kind of conservative enclave, but aren't you doing a lot of soul winning into Portland, or
Yeah.
do you do most of it in Vancouver?
Yeah, it's hit or miss. We do most of it in Vancouver, but we do have soul winning times just specifically for Portland. And we have one in Gresham now. I don't know if you know where Gresham is, but it's outer Portland East. And that's very receptive out there.
good.
So there's definitely lots of places
Now,
in Portland that's receptive.
refresh my memory. When we did the Portland Soul Winning Marathon, that was a really successful event for us. And I think we had because this is before your church was started.
Right.
We had 84 soul winners show up. We had a bunch of people saved, a bunch of people baptized. Didn't we do some soul winning? Didn't we do soul winning on the Oregon side in Portland, I think, right? All the soul winning, right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. And we had a pretty good day.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad, yeah.
Yeah, and there was a lot of people. That was like East Portland.
Yeah.
So those are the rougher
And
areas.
I think that you live in one of the most beautiful areas in the country.
Yeah.
Because I remember just that whole day of that soul winning marathon, I was just taking in the beauty of the Pacific Northwest.
Mm-hmm.
Just everybody's yard had just these beautiful giant trees. I mean, just huge trees, right? Just beautiful landscape, the leaves. Are you getting the fall colors now?
Yeah, and it's been real nice. It's been a real nice fall this year.
Yeah.
Yesterday was 55 degrees. That's warm for this time of year.
It's
there.
one of the most beautiful areas in the country. I
Yeah,
think.
there's no doubt about
The
that.
Pacific Northwest is great. Second only to Arizona.
Yeah.
So being a pastor now, is there anything that has surprised you, or have you kind of thought to yourself, oh, wow, this is what it's like to be a pastor, or this is more work than I thought, or it's easier than I thought? I mean, what does it feel like being a pastor now?
I don't know. I mean, I definitely get a little different respect level, I think, from people. And for a long time, it took a long time for people to get used to calling me pastor, like, hey, Brother Aaron, or, Aaron. And that's fine,
Because they knew you before.
Right, yeah.
So they have
we
to
were all
get
just
used
friends,
to.
you know what I mean? It's
They have
like,
to get used to thinking of you as Pastor Thompson.
Yeah,
now.
yeah. And so, but as far as it being harder, I mean, the hard part about being a pastor is having to work a full-time job at the same time. That's what makes it difficult. And like the times when I'm working a lot of overtime and then having to come and, try to bring my best message I can.
Right.
Being tired, and you know what it's like.
Well, you got to be getting close to being full time, right? Are you thinking about going full time soon?
I don't know how soon it's going to be. I mean, I don't know. I'm not like
because if you're running over 100, you're probably getting pretty
getting
close.
close. I would say, yeah. But
that point,
we'll see what happens. I definitely at some point want to be full time. I can see when I'm more like I took a couple of weeks or like a week off not too long ago, and it was just like, I just felt like I had a lot of time to focus on my sermons and just like get things, in order that I normally don't have time for. And I'm like, man, this is what it's like to actually be able to be full time.
Yeah, it's tough working a full-time job and being a pastor at the same time. And the bigger the church gets, people are calling you, people need things, there's more going on.
Yeah,
so
and the more
it's a challenge.
The bigger our church gets, the more phone calls we're getting, and even my wife, she like fields the calls from the ladies and things like that for me, and she works real hard too. I mean, it's definitely been a challenge, and I got to admit, like when we first started the church, I thought, man, am I gonna be able to do this? Because it's, people, just a word of advice for people that want to become a pastor. It's harder than you think it is, but it's rewarding. And I love being a pastor. I'm very thankful for being able to be a pastor. But people that think it's easy or that, they're crazy.
So how do you come up with your sermon ideas?
Honestly, I just, when I'm in Thursday nights, I'm in a Bible study, so my sermon ideas come, from the chapter I'm in. I'm in the book of Acts right now.
That's the easiest one because you don't have to think about it. That's how I'm on Wednesday nights. I'm going through a book, so it's just, I know I'm preaching on 1 Chronicles, so it's one less thing to think about. What about on Sunday, though, when you're coming up with your sermons?
On Sunday, basically I pray and I say, God, what does our people need this week? I mean, and sometimes, I'll like, I want to preach this sermon, but then I'll change and say, and for some reason, I'm just not feeling it. Mm-hmm. I'm not feeling the passion that I need to preach that sermon that I want to preach. And so I just shelve that sermon and say, okay, well, I'll come back to this later.
And that's great advice. If you're not feeling the passion, put it on the shelf. Because a few weeks later, you will be passionate about that subject.
Yeah, I was going to preach on meekness last Sunday morning, and I wasn't feeling very meek or something. I don't know.
But you'll be meek.
I'll be meek
in a week or two.
So, yeah.
No, that's great advice, because what I'm always saying is, if I'm not excited about my sermon, why would the people listening to me be excited about it? So you've got to be passionate and fired up, and God can lead us that way by stirring us up about the issues that people need to hear.
Yeah, and sometimes you got to do the face-ripping sermon against the Jews and the homos or whatever, but people got to get something for their daily life and their weekly life, because there's so many people in church, and as the church gets bigger, you don't have that one-on-one time that you used to have with someone so much, and
to encourage them and motivate them.
Right. Yeah. And so sometimes it's good to I like to mix it up and just preach different types of sermons and things that'll help them in their Christian life.
Practical things, encouraging things. Other things are more just doctrinal or ripping some face.
Yeah. Soul winning's always good.
Yeah. You got to keep them soul. Well, you got 100% of the people out soul winning. So.
Yeah. And I'm sure it might not be that way always, but we really did have some warriors that started that church. We all started it together, and we'd already been soul winning for a long time, so that helps. It really does. So, like, if you have a church that starts up in like the past, nobody knows anybody, and it's just brand new. It's a little harder road to hoe, So, but it's been great. I'm super excited about our church and super excited about being a pastor, and I'm very thankful to God, because I thought Vancouver and Portland are going to go to hell, and I didn't want to see that happen. So I just felt like if we all moved away, then
it'd really be doomed.
Yeah, it's
No, it's better that you stayed for sure.
And I think that's what I see starting is this trend where there's 30, 40 people in this area. And it's like, where do you want to start a church? Well, probably in the place where there's 30 or 40 people.
Yeah, the groups of people that are already kind of metastasizing. So that initial kind of core group, how many people was that when the satellite first started, when Pastor Jimenez was overseeing it as a Verity Vancouver ministry? Was that about 30 to 40 people at that time?
It was 22.
22 people. So you started with 22 people, and then here we are just a few years later, and over 100 people.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great growth.
It's incredible.
And it's encouraging to other people across the country who might be sitting in a place where they have about 22 people.
Yeah.
Where could they be 2-3 years from now?
Yeah. And so you got to be faithful where you're at. You know, that's one of the things, like, if Pastor White, my pastor, would have said, you know, he's always causing problems, you know, all he does is just fight with people about the post-trib rapture.
Yeah.
He's just always, like, trying to throw it in their face that the Jews aren't God's.
Then Brother Jimenez wouldn't want to work with you.
He wouldn't have. He would have said no.
Yeah.
So that's something that I see that needs to be fixed with some people. It's just like, you know, you got, you know, they'll listen to all the other preaching, but then when it comes to, hey, go to church, be a blessing,
Yeah.
you know, shut up, sit down and learn something, you know.
Well, there's no question that God's going to bless the people who are doing the best with what they have now.
Right.
So the 22 people who are going to church, trying their best to get along with people, being a blessing, going soul winning, and aggressively serving God, you know, that's who God's going to gift with a pastor.
Yeah.
Because he said, you know, he gave some pastors, he gave them teachers, he gave them evangelists.
Yeah.
So that's who's going to get the gifts, are the people who are pleasing God.
Right. Yeah, and Pastor Jimenez, if I would have not got a good report, that church would have never started there. He would have said, yeah, I don't think so.
Right.
You know. And I'm really thankful for Pastor Jimenez for giving us the chance to even make it happen. I mean, crazy time for him to start a church, right?
Right. He was going through his darkest hour, literally.
Yeah, yeah. And I had gone to visit him several times even before that, and so we'd become friends, you know, just from visiting and hanging out and talking and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's been a ride. It's been a wild ride, but it's been a great ride, and I'm super excited about the future.
All right. Well, thanks so much for talking with me.
Thanks for
Enjoyed
having
it.
me. I appreciate it. It's been great.